All right, so even though when you got up this morning, you may not have said, gosh, I really want to dive into the nitty gritty of global supply chain logistics, let me tell you why I think this is an important thing. First of all, it starts with the premise that, guess what? Amazon's not the only game in town. There's more than one warehouse in this world, and despite them being amazing and having FBA have extraordinary benefits, they are not the sole decision that you have to consider. Who am I? My name's Steve Simonson. If you want to find out about me, go look me up. Let's just say I've been around the block. This is my 29th year in business, and I've shipped literally, I don't know, thousands, probably tens of thousands of containers over my time. And I have a full-time China team. We buy and sell and move product all around the world on a routine basis. So you just have to take my word that I've been around the block. And I'm going to share with you kind of my view of the world, how I see this stuff, and how I think it can help you. So first of all, an Amazon cornerstone business is something that I describe as somebody who kind of got started with a private label or their own brand, and they are putting it on Amazon first. That's the tip of the spear, so to speak. And their objective is to build a brand and create equity and value for the customer and long-term wealth for themselves. So a cornerstone business is just the beginning point on Amazon. And whether or not guys decide to expand after that or sell or whatever, doesn't matter, but you started on Amazon. That's what an Amazon cornerstone business is to me. And I think that the ordinary approach to logistics is just simple point to point. We're going to ship it from China to FBA warehouse in the USA. And it doesn't matter if it's in the USA or UK or Japan or anywhere else for that matter, Italy, France, wherever they have FBA warehouses. The point is that you're literally going from an origin to a destination, and it's an Amazon FBA. And that's a very, very viable way to get done. It doesn't matter if you're shipping by container, less than container, or air. It's a very efficient way to do it, especially as you get started and the quantities are fairly low. But here's some facts that we need to discuss. And these are facts. This is not my conjecture. These things are absolutely backed by reality. So we all know that FBA fees continue to rise, and there's no end in sight. It's not like Amazon looked at it a couple years ago and said, we're going to really fix ourselves on this price, and we're going to deliver this price from now on. No, every 6 months they look at it and go, you know what? We need to increase the prices again. And they even augment it by things like what we call the surge pricing during the peak periods. So November, December is when everybody wants to put stuff in, so we're going to charge even more for that time. And this is an economic reality of supply and demand. Despite them building tons of new FBA centers, there's a finite amount of space in these warehouses. And so Amazon, it's not in their interest to just keep the stuff sitting there for a long period of time. That's why long-term storage fees. That's why surge pricing. That's why even the day-to-day prices continue to go up. What does this mean? It means that as the demand continues to increase by cornerstone businesses and guys in the marketplace trying to put products in, they will raise the price to meet the demand. If the demand suddenly fell away, they might stop raising prices or maybe even consider lowering the prices. It's a true economic argument, and frankly, it's their stuff, and I tend to agree with their principles here. The one other thing I want to talk about is the unintended benefits that Amazon gets. So obviously, when they increase an FBA price, they're getting more money, and that's fine. And that's a very clear and obvious benefit. But a benefit people don't always think about is the more efficient they make Amazon sellers. So if they force us to increase our turns, that is how many times we cycle our inventory, from beginning to end through their warehouses, the more turns that we put through that warehouse, the more money they make. They make money on the receiving, they make money on the shipping, and they make some amount of money on the storage. But they care less about the storage and more about the in and out. So as they push us to ship in smaller shipments more often or push more volume or whatever the case is, all of these things fuel other benefits to Amazon. So in my own mind, there is no comprehensible reason why they would stop raising prices and driving us to be more and more efficient and smart about our logistics. So just know that if you don't like what's happened so far with pricing, it ain't going to get any better. Okay, so let's talk about what the global supply chain looks like. And there's kind of the old way of looking at stuff, which is this. Again, it's more or less, if you have a brand and you want to start a brand, not just in your own country, but other countries, you either have to open your own warehouse, and that means hiring people, getting forklifts, signing leases, getting the light bill turned on, getting the water thing turned on, who's going to clean the bathrooms. Right? There's a minutia level of detail that is ridiculous, and people don't often think about it. That's to open your own place. It's extraordinarily cumbersome and complex. And believe me, one time I had dozens of warehouses across the U.S., and it was a pain just to get people to show up on a timely basis at times. So if you say, no, I'm not going to do my own warehouse, then your other option in the old days was find a distributor. And if you couldn't figure out how to give the distributor a big enough benefit package, then they wouldn't carry your product. And that means you were blocked out of that new marketplace, even in your own country if you're unwilling to do those things, or a foreign country. But today that's changed. So today we talk about a third-party logistics center, also known as a 3PL. So a 3PL is essentially something that they'll take the burden of warehousing and getting guys to show up and maintaining forklifts and kind of all the OSHA stuff that goes along with that. They'll take all of that off your back. And that's really all Amazon FBA is. They are a third-party logistics center. They're willing to do that work for you, and where you don't have to worry about it. But a lot of people don't realize that there are 3PLs all across the world now. In the United States, Canada, of course, Mexico, Brazil, Japan, all across Europe and beyond, and including Australia, by the way. And with Amazon's new move into Australia, this same concept I'm going to share with you will be something to consider if it's the right move. What's my point? Essentially, if you want to move into cross-border sales, you can do it easier than ever now with your own brand and stay in control. That's really good for you. There's still the compliance and regulatory hurdles you got to do to make sure that you can sell and clear customs and so forth in each country. But those are now even getting easier to overcome as basically the governments go, as long as we're getting our tax money, we want to increase and encourage trade as much as we can. Just get us our money. So the world has changed because of third-party logistics centers. And that is very much in your favor. It's never been this good or this easy. And the technology is what kind of enables a lot of this stuff to be managed. So here's how I look at the world today. The global supply chain is more or less a flow chart. Just think of this as a flow chart almost. So if you start with your point of origin, and that could be a Chinese factory or a factory in any country for that matter, then you have to decide how you're going to ship that from its origin to the required destination. So in our first example that we showed, where most Cornerstone guys are going point to point, they're going, probably China to the U.S. That's, one stop. It's simple, it's easy to understand, and that's life. And again, as you're starting and scaling up, that's a fine option. In fact, it's an extraordinary option. But as you grow and as you start talking about dozens of containers a month and beyond, you really have to think about what makes sense from a complete supply chain perspective. So in the really advanced guys, if you're starting to do dozens of containers a month, you might even think about, if you're sourcing a lot from China, staging in China as well. Or if not China, maybe Hong Kong. Often it makes sense for the Chinese guys to get their export credits and so on to actually get it out of the country. With the right regulatory compliance, you could drop all that stuff in Asia, in Hong Kong. So why is that a benefit to you? Well, instead of you sending, a bunch of containers to the US and a bunch of containers to the UK and just kind of hoping the sales work out, you aggregate your inventory in Asia, and then you decide based on the volume that's necessary, how much to move to each country. Maybe you say, I'm going to move a half a container to UK, a quarter of a container to Canada, and a full container to the US, or pallets, or whatever the case may be. The entire point is this lower cost of storage in Asia, and you'll be able to move it faster to various required destination points. How will you move it? You'll move it just like you do today, either by air or by ocean freight. Now in air, I want to call out, there's a couple different kinds of air. There's Air Express, which guys are most familiar with, and then there's what I call remnant rates. This is where essentially you can contract with a provider and say, I want it to go by air, but if somebody else comes in and pays the Air Express rate, they will bump my shipment. And my average turnaround time on those remnant is 3 to 7 days from China to the US. So the average Air Express might be 2 to 3 days, kind of guaranteed. That's why you pay the higher price. But the remnant might take you a few extra days. It might even drag on a little bit more in the holiday time when there's extra demand. But it's a lot less. It can be 25 to 50% less to use the remnant rates. And just a kind of an insider tip, like UPS SCS is a name you'll kind of want to remember. That means supply chain solutions. It's a completely different division than UPS. If you have a UPS account or UPS Air account, that's not the UPS SCS account. And if you don't have that simple difference, your quotes will be massively different. So if your volume on each individual shipment is big enough, you can use SCS. And then, of course, in ocean freight, there's full container load and there's less than container load. And now there's amazing providers, and we can talk about how to refer you to those guys later. But they're amazing guys that are armed with technology and give you great visibility, make the process much, much easier because of technology. So you go from the origin, then you decide your freight route based on certain economic principles, and then you say, where am I sending it? Now you can just send it directly into FBA. They are your staging and storage warehouse today. And you don't have to feed it to anybody else after that because it's where it needs to be for the last mile delivery. But what I want to have you think about is, what if you send it to a 3PL that is a staging and storage facility, and then you fed Amazon from there? So in this case, we're going to ship it from China. We'll ship it to the US to a staging and storage facility in bulk. That's where the bulk of your materials are. Then you feed in pallets or multiple pallets to Amazon based on your quantities that you need each month or week or however you decide to do your logistics. So what does that look like? That means you bring in, let's just say, a container into the US to your staging warehouse. This 3PL then breaks down the container and says, how many containers do you want to go to the US? How many do you want to go to Mexico? How many do you want to go to Canada? And you may say, you know what? I don't know yet. Just hold them there for a little bit until I figure it out. That's fine. It takes pressure off of you instead of having to kind of deal with FBA's. You better have every document, every single thing right down to the wire well ahead of time. It takes some of the pressure away. Once you just figure out what you want to feed into Amazon US, for example, you do that based on your turns, your volume. If you're doing 1,000 units a month, you probably want to have a month and a half to 2 months worth of inventory in the facility. 2 months in the facility, that's about 6 turns a year, right? Because your inventory will sell out from the beginning of the first month by the end of the second month. That's 6 turns. If you sell on every 30 days, that's 12 turns per year. The more turns, the better. Don't forget that economic principle. So if you're having it at your storage and you're feeding it in Amazon, you monitor your turns. If you decide you want to ship in weekly or bi-weekly or monthly, whatever it is, just base it on your volume. And then you monitor it, make sure if your sales are going up, great, you send in more faster. And if they're slightly behind, maybe you pump the brakes on the next shipment so you don't get burdened by having too much stock in Amazon. Amazon will prefer this long term. It's better for them because they don't get their warehouses gummed up with long-term storage, and it's cheaper for you. Believe it or not, besides, I know everybody thinks to themselves, well, if I have to ship it here and then I have to ship it there, doesn't that cost more money? The answer is no, and especially no if your volume increases. The cost to land a container at a third-party facility is the same as it would be at Amazon, and the incremental cost of you shipping in a pallet or two at a time, especially because you can leverage Amazon's rates, is not that much. Yes, there's some effort to manage it. Yes, there's some added freight costs. But if you take the entire equation and you look at Amazon's receiving, storage, maybe returns, long-term storage, whatever it is, you will, in my case, in every instance we've ever run, it's always cheaper to do it like this, especially when it's at bulk. When you're smaller, even though it would inherently be cheaper, it may still make more sense to do it at FBA because it takes a lot of worries and a lot of headaches away from you. So you've got it at the staging facility, the 3PL. They send in pallets to Amazon or any distributors or other bulk buyers you may have. And some of those warehouses even have the capability to do drop shipments. Those are the ones that I like the best, where they can do last mile delivery. And that is mostly relevant if you consider other marketing channels, your own website, eBay, Walmart, Overstock, the list goes on and on. None of those other third-party guys want you using Amazon FBA warehouses. They do not want to see that your shipments for their customers on their brand show up in an Amazon box. And you have to pay extra if you want Amazon to do a multi-channel fulfillment in a blank box, which again adds further cost to you. So my point is, there are 2 types of staging and storage warehouses. One is just pure, they'll stage and they'll store bulk orders only. So they're not going to break down and do any last mile delivery, no drop shipping for you. Those guys are a little less expensive for their pallet storage rates in general. The guys who can do both the long-term storage and the last mile delivery, those guys typically are going to be just a little bit more expensive, but a lot more flexible, and especially when you're starting out, that flexibility can count. And as you notice on the screen, there is on the top is North America, on the bottom is Europe. But you could layer in Australia and Japan, and really think of this in any marketplace that you're going to do business. The same principles work. You go from origin through the freight provider to your staging and storage. You feed whoever you need to, including Amazon, and you have the flexibility of doing drop shipping as well. And you repeat this with each and every country that you do business in. This concept, again, it's not complicated in theory, but it is tough to execute. And so I want guys to be sure that you're ready for it. And let me just throw one other wrinkle in here. So I have a series of axioms that I talked about. Excuse my fast slide there. My axiom number 3 is every upgrade is a downgrade at first. And what that means is when you put in a new system, it feels painful. It's like I have to learn all this new stuff. I have to comply with this new stuff. The old way was better. It was easier. And especially if you have a team, that's absolutely what you're going to hear. And my advice is to be very careful and very cautious about this reality, and just know that at first it will feel worse. But 6 months later, I generally will say, you will almost never want to go back to the way it was. And when I have a large team, I will say to them, hey, in 6 months, after you suck up some of the pain, some of the learning, some of these new things we have to do, in 6 months, if you still hate it, if it's still worse and we can economically prove how it's worse, we'll go back to the old way because I was wrong. And I've never had to go back because we're thoughtful about how we deploy and put these things in. So if you've never heard of a GS128, also known as a UCC128, this allows for an inbound pallet to be received by big companies. This includes third-party warehouses at sometimes. It includes big multi-channel guys. If you're shipping to Walmart by pallet or Staples, they're going to want this kind of pallet label on there most often. And sometimes you can have an EDI company handle this for you. There's lots of ways to handle EDI if you have those multi-channels. But my point is to have you take a close look at these labels. This is the same label type. It's a UCC 128, which is the old way of referring to it, now called a GS1 128. This is the exact same label format, but it's actually different. See how it's laid out different for Staples on the left and Walmart on the right? This is something that you need to be prepared for at some point. And there are software programs and providers that can help you solve this. Now, you don't have to worry about this for Amazon, but if you do branch into other marketplaces, you need to consider this as a future complexity. And I want to make sure you think about how you're going to be compliant with it, and can your 3PL be compliant with it. I also want to share with you one other thing that I consider what I call warehouse basics, essentially. Most of you guys understand that you need a UPC code on an individual item. And I know some of you use FN SKUs for Amazon, and that's a whole different discussion, but that's fine. That's the same principle. One barcode on one single item. But as you grow, especially if you plan on using a larger scale 3PL provider, you're going to want to have a pallet UPC code that says how many cases are on that pallet. You're going to want to have a case UPC code that says how many inner case packs are in each individual case. And then, of course, inside the inner case pack, you have the individual item. So why does this exist? What does this scheme even have to do with anything? Now, this has to do with how fast they can scan and receive products and ship products. So your smaller 3PLs generally are not going to force you to comply with this, which is another benefit of starting small. But your biggest guys, they won't force you to comply with this, but if you don't, it's going to cost you a ton of money. And let me give you a quick example of how. So when you ship in, let's just say you have a pallet that's coming into this third-party logistics provider. They scan it in and they go, okay, one pallet, they scan it and it shows how many cases, inner cases, and ultimately items are on that pallet. And they just put it in storage. One scan, one movement with a forklift, they're done. If you don't have the pallet UPCs or case UPCs or even inner case packs, whatever, then they will scan whatever your biggest unit that you have available. Maybe you shipped in 10 cases, but you have a case UPC, they'll just scan the 10 cases. If you don't have a case UPC and you don't have inner cases, then they'll go down to each individual item. And remember, I said this pallet had 1,000 items on it. So now they're going to charge you to receive and hand scan 1,000 items, and also take them out of the package or the cartons and put them back in. Every time you do that sort of thing, it's potential to damage your products. And you're probably going to pay at least 50 cents to receive those each individual item because of the hand scanning. Plus, you're going to pay when you ship it out another, let's say, $1.50, $1.75 per unit. So for each individual item. So now you're over $2,000 of cost. But if you had that UPC on the pallet itself, they would have scanned it in. Maybe it's $10 to receive a pallet. Maybe it's $25 to ship out a pallet. So literally $2,000 in handling versus $35 of handling. This is why when you start thinking about true warehouse management, true logistics, you need to know that these things exist. Don't get panicked about it. I'm not trying to scare guys. I want you to understand that no matter where you are in your business, that these things exist. How you use them, when you use them, is always going to be up to you. But if you didn't know they existed, then you walk around in a world of ignorant bliss, which is not really good for you long term. So just know that they exist, and also know that the smaller 3PLs are probably a place to begin. Then there's middle-sized guys, and then there's big guys. The small guys are, you're going to ship through them maybe 1,000 units a month or less, drop ship. They can do plenty of pallets. Middle-sized guy, that's going to be 1,000 units per day they're going to ship, or less, roughly. Excuse me. And then the big guys, they are going to be 1,000 units an hour or even far beyond. I know one 3PL that shipped out 700,000 units in a single day for one client. And they were all drop ships, not a bunch of pallets with a bunch of items. So these guys can scale just like Amazon can scale at the biggest level. But if you don't need that full scale, you're going to pay a lower price. You're going to have an easier time managing the smaller guys. That's my point, and that's how I would encourage you guys to start. Guys and gals, by the way. Everybody's welcome. So that's all I have to say about that. The final points, I suppose, that I want to have you carry on is logistics is now easier than ever. Regulatory compliance is easier, but still needs to be done. Supply chain compliance, like the UPC codes and the right labels and things like that, it's easy when you're sending to Amazon, and that's fine. Just keep doing that. But over time, you want to make sure that you have some compliance philosophies built in. And the point of this is to scale with leverage. So what does that mean? If a guy scales up his business by 10 times in revenue and his costs scale up by 10 or 12 times in revenue, he's losing ground. It's a worse business than when he was smaller and maybe had better leverage. But if you can scale your business up by 10 times in revenue or 5 times, whatever the case may be, we'll use 10 times for this example, and your expenses only go up by 3 or 4 times, now you have leverage. And leverage ultimately is what creates free cash flow. It's what creates equity in a brand, and it's ultimately what creates wealth for the entrepreneurs who are involved in starting these companies. And that's my mission for any entrepreneurs, to understand how to achieve whatever their goals really are. And almost always it involves scaling with leverage. So you can see if you guys go to awesomers.com/go-global, we'll send you some free resources and maybe some introductions to some folks we think can help you. I don't do affiliate stuff. You don't have to think about this. This is not about me. This is all about you. I really, truly believe in entrepreneurs. I love entrepreneurs. They make the world a better place. They solve the world's problems. They don't create problems. And that's why I do all of this.